Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. I have a very exciting guest today to talk about numbers, which is probably the most important part of business. Having done it wrong for a lot of years myself, and now doing it right, I know how important the numbers are. I have Lauren Furtado with Unconventional CFO Services. Good morning, Lauren. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you? And yes, the numbers are right the most exciting and sexy part of business.
Yeah, no, I'm afraid of them. My fear, so I do look at them probably too often. Yes. All right. So before we dive into all the tactical things we're going to talk about, tell us a little bit about your company and how you got here.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll say I took the traditional route as an accountant, even though I do call myself the unconventional. If you see me, you typically don't say, oh, she looks like a CPA. But I did take the traditional route from a career perspective. Went to college, got my master's degree in accounting, and then worked for a big four public accounting firm for almost 20 years. So was serving multi-billion dollar pharmaceutical and manufacturing companies throughout my career, and dabbled in a lot of different industries. But I'll say most of my time was spent, since I do sit in New Jersey, on big pharma as well as industrial products companies. So a lot of manufacturing, a lot of kind of big company names that a lot of people are familiar with. But for me, there was a big gap when I got to a certain point in my career about impact and about who I was serving. So for me, where I truly am passionate is serving small business owners. It is bringing my expertise that I have gained for almost 20 years of seeing these big companies and how they operate and churn out money. And how can I bring that expertise to the little guys, right? The guys who are, I like to say, serve the blue collar industry. And, it's an array of different trades and things like that in terms of who I serve, but it is the guys who have put their blood, sweat, and tears into building companies, multi-generational companies sometimes, right, where families are fully invested. So for me, it was a clear transition in terms of bringing my expertise from the big company side really to help business owners and understanding their finances a little better.
And I know you work with a lot of construction companies. Was there any specific construction in your background, or how did you
Yeah.
end up there?
Yes. So I would say we are an electrical company in this house. So my husband was part of the local here, based out of New York. So we are a local three family here in the Furtado house. So for me, seeing him, show up to work every day and putting his body into every day that he works and truly being passionate about it. He always joked about starting his own company. Unfortunately, didn't have the chance to. But yeah, I would say the passion really is being exposed from a family perspective to seeing the electrical trade ins and outs. And again, just wanting to really help the companies succeed and identify where they have opportunities from a financial point of view in terms of truly understanding what their numbers are trying to tell them.
Gotcha. And because I think so many guys in the construction industry have a good heart and want to go do what they're good at doing, but really fall down on the numbers, right? And have no idea if they're making money or not. And so for guys like those, what is a fractional CFO? What does that mean?
Yep. So fractional CFO really is a CFO that you bring in that's part-time, where you don't have someone fully dedicated to the role in your company on payroll as a W-2 employee. It is, I would say the sweet spot from usually a revenue perspective is usually about 3 million to, let's call it 20 million in terms of revenue, where usually you need someone that's part-time. And then our goal is to get you where you need someone full time and that you don't need us forever, right? So you'll bring me in my team, and we come in and we do dashboards with you each month, and we talk about the results of your company in terms of what's gone on for the last 30 days. And really, where we spend a lot of time is looking at the future. So a CFO truly is focused on the windshield. I always say accountants and bookkeepers are looking at the past, their windshield, their rear view mirror focus, looking at, hey, here's what we did, and that's important, right, to understand how we got there. But this is truly how do we meet our goals, or how do we fix our problems on a go forward basis. And so we spend a ton of time looking at cash flow projection with the small businesses. But yeah, so we meet each month, and I would say the biggest thing that we create for guys, especially if they came up through the trades, right, is executive level accountability. It
What
is, you can have your numbers, right? You can log into QuickBooks, but if you don't understand and have someone checking in and saying, oh, last month we talked about these specific action items that you were going to take in order to improve the finances in your business. Did you do it? Right. So it's creating action items so they understand, okay, this is what we used to do. Now to get where we want to go, this is exactly what needs to be done. So having someone in your corner outside of the business to really push you and urge you to take those actions to get to those goals, because at the end of the day, the goals of each CEO is what we ground ourselves in.
So you're like a financial coach, basically.
Yeah. We'll do some cheerleading along the way as well.
I've been in business. I work in the construction industry, kind of both. And one of the biggest things that I've seen and I came from is that people are running the business just to run the business. And how do you get somebody to, how do you help them change their mind frame to have goals and to realize that they can grow this thing?
Yeah. So I think it's a very interesting dynamic to probe a little bit from a personal perspective, right? Because one of the big things in terms of goals is how much money do you need or want to pull out of your business in order to meet personal goals? I've had so many conversations that are like, well, I want to send my daughter to this specific college and it's going to cost me this much money, which I'm not pulling out of the business right now. Or let's say the wife works for the business too, and she wants to spend more time with the kids. Okay, well, how do we identify a hire that can supplement the things she was doing, right? So I think it's truly understanding the personal stuff sometimes. So it's pushing people to really understand, like, what are we trying to accomplish? To your point, is it just running it day to day and like getting through it? Or is it truly like being growth minded? And I think for someone bringing in a fractional CFO, that growth mindset of, oh, I want to open another location, or I, want to increase my footprint from a hiring perspective, and I want to hire X amount of people. So I think it's really understanding what they want to accomplish and defining what the goals are. If they don't have them set, we go through that exercise in onboarding of saying, okay, what are the top 3 goals? And if we need help, like I'll just ask a ton of questions.
Well, and I think you bring that up, and I think it's a great point. Is that yes, it's a business, and we run it, we feed our people and everything. But at the end of the day, we're not in business just to be in business, right?
No.
How can you help business to do what you want to do, right?
Yep, absolutely. Otherwise, it's a glorified hobby, right? Like at the end of the day, as much as you want to ignore the numbers, like we're all in it to make some money.
Well, yeah, and but nobody wants to work 80 hours a week forever, right? It might be
Nope.
what initially. So, what are the four big metrics that you have construction and small business
Yep.
look at in general?
Yeah. So maybe before jumping into the 4 metrics, I would say we do develop KPIs, which are key performance indicators, right? Specific to either industry or again, client goals, right? So if let's say advertising is one of your big areas of focus, maybe we're looking at conversion rates or things like that. So there is some level of tailoring, but at the end of the day, every small business should focus on 4 key things. And this is where I hope to bring some simplicity into looking at the numbers, because to your point, there can be a level of intimidation or annoyance even with having to look at the numbers. So I think when you break it down to these 4 key metrics, it becomes so much more digestible and is so much easier to understand where there's holes or opportunities. So the first is revenue, right? And obviously in the construction space, pricing and job costing can get a little complex, but revenue is number one. Second is gross profit, right? So when you're looking at job costing, you cannot ignore how much it's going to cost you to produce, right? So you've got your time and materials. It is your direct cost to produce on those specific jobs. Then your net profit. That's where you're incorporating legal expenses. You're looking at insurance. You're looking at rental space. So a number of different, just to operate your business. What are the other costs? Then lastly, cash. And this one, cash is king always. And that's why I had mentioned before cash flows. So cash flows is really a projection over time of what your cash balance is going to be based on where you're going. And that is, again, where we spend the most time with business owners understanding, okay, if I hire this person at this point in time, here's what's going to do to my cash balance. Because unfortunately, you do have people who are looking at, and people do it from a personal perspective. You can log into your, I don't know, Chase bank account and say, Oh, I have $10,000 in the bank. I can go on that vacation, or I can buy that piece of equipment or hire that person, not understanding, well, I have other payments that are due like next week for other things, right? And one of the things that we see quite often is a lot of stress around mostly trying to make payroll, or make debt payments, or liquidate on your payables. So it's really understanding what your commitments are, and especially when there's seasonality in the business. This is so important to manage your cash flows over time.
So, what are some tactics that you suggest to build that cash flow, or how do you save it away? What does that look like to actually put it into action so that you
Yep.
don't have to stress about payroll? So yet you have like this chunk there that is ready to go for payroll, and you don't have to get all stressed out about it.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's about understanding it and actually monitoring it. It's not hard to put a cash flow together. I have a free template on my website. It is a very straightforward spreadsheet, and I have a quick little training that comes along with it in terms of start here, put these inputs, and you can look at it. But if you're going to put it together and never look at it again, it is meaningless, and it is important to look at prior to making a decision. So, I heard an example once of a CEO who had a cash flow like calendar block every Thursday for like 30 minutes. Now that's like the ideal scenario, right? Where you have somebody who's literally monitoring every week and looking at it. But I would say if you have a fractional CFO, it's a no brainer. We're going to look at it at least every month. But I'm going to get you in the practice of using it on your own, understanding how to update it on a weekly basis, bi-weekly basis, depending on kind of the frequency of what's useful for you. But it's really, as you're making decisions, revisiting that. Or when you run into an issue, let's say you're not, your AR slows down and you're not collecting payments from customers. And we have an issue with, again, being able to make payments because you continue to see slowing, or you need to focus on collectability and getting that cash in the door. So I would say regular monitoring is the key to it.
Gotcha. And I know as a small business owner, especially when it came up and it was just you would just go buy things and do things and hire things and trying to break that habit of, okay, let's stop, let's have a conversation before we go get that piece of equipment or hire that person. Do you help with
Yep.
that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially like, right, when it comes to like the equipment, maybe it seems like a great deal at the time, right? But then understanding, like, do you have the revenue to even be able to utilize that piece of equipment? And then again, when you have seasonality in your business, is that truly the best use of cash, as of right now? So it's a question. The answer may be yes, right? So we can plug that in exactly where it needs to go, and then understand, okay, and then the revenue related to this comes in 3 months later, and that's okay, right? 'Cause I always look at, the example of like when you're trying to lose weight, right? Sometimes when you're up a pound, or when you're an overall goal, that's okay, right? So there may be times where you might be a little tighter on the cash, but if it's temporary, and again, you're still able to make payroll, you're not laying people off just to buy a truck or whatever it is, then I think that's a good position to be in. So it's just understanding kind of, what's our appetite for cash balance and how much do we want to have on hand.
And how often should business owners be looking at the numbers? Because I know business owners, especially people in the construction industry, have a bad habit of like, okay, I'm just going to hire you and hire an accounting and assuming that you're watching everything. What is the
Yep.
level of involvement and how often?
Yeah. So that mindset is absolutely not correct, right? So I can look at the numbers, but it is your business, right? The execution and the decision making truly sit with the CEOs. So I can advise you. We can talk about the action items. But at the end of the day, like, you own what path we're going to take, and also the strategy in that. So, I mentioned ads or marketing. At the end of the day, I'm not a marketing expert. I cannot tell you how to implement that. I have no responsibility to try to execute that. I can help you understand financially kind of what the impacts of certain things are going to be, and look at the results of those, but you have to still be engaged. And where I start to fall off with a client engagement perspective, if guys aren't showing up for monthly check-ins or biweekly calls, we're not going to get anywhere. And you're not going to want to keep me on with the company, because I can only go so far with it. I can analyze it, but it is your responsibility to own the numbers in your business.
What do you tell the guys that do that they know stuff is a mess and they're scared to call you?
And listen, I always say, I'm like, I've always seen worse. Trust me, I've seen like bankruptcies. I've seen like a lot of different scenarios over my tenure in my career. So it, it is what it is, right? Like just own it. And the thing is, we cannot fix it if we are not willing to admit that we don't know. And it's even just the understanding of these metrics. I will sit and explain it to you very simply. Like the expectation is not that you have a CPA license and 20 years experience in accounting like I do. I'm going to make it digestible in a way that doesn't feel so intimidating. And when the processes are in place of the regular check-ins and the spreadsheets and all that good stuff, it's not going to feel so overwhelming and it's not going to feel so annoying.
Well, because too, I mean, I've seen it over the years, especially as the economy goes up and down. Like, in my opinion, the time to hire somebody is when you have money, right? Because
Yep.
as soon as you start to slow down, if you're not prepared, it could be a death sentence, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We always use the analogy of being lost in the forest. Like, you don't want to be scrambling looking for the map once you already are. You want to have it before you step foot into it. So, understanding clearly where you're going and having somebody engaged is
Yeah, and
exactly the right time.
it can happen so fast. Like you're doing good, and then all of a sudden payments stop or the job stop, and then yeah, it's a disaster. So if people are looking to hire like someone like a CFO, what questions should they be asking? What should they be looking for?
Yeah, so I think the understanding of the different types of accountants sometimes is like elusive to people still. So I'm just going to maybe spend a second talking about the different types of people. So first is the bookkeeper, right? Those are the people in the day-to-day transactions. Then you have an accountant who typically can process payroll and looks at your receivables and processing AP and doing account recs. Then you have tax folks. Those people are focused on two things. One, compliance, right? Making sure you're making payments and that you've got your return filed when it needs to be. And then you've got tax planning and strategy as well. And then CFO, I would say, is beyond that, right? So this is again, if you are looking for comfort and truly understanding what your numbers are trying to tell you about your business and you are growth minded, then the CFO route is right for you. I think, like any professional, it truly is understanding the scope of work. Exactly what are they giving you? Show me the dashboard. So, part of my sales process, I show them, and if they give me their financial information, I can plug it in. Here's exactly how I'm going to present it to you every period. And here's the discussion points we're going to have. The frequency of communication is another key piece, is understanding, are we talking quarterly? Are we talking monthly? And it may depend on which package they go with, and really what the needs are in the business. And then what's the communication outside of that? So just making sure we don't have any, miscommunication as to what the response rates are going to be via email or Slack or whatever the communication lines are. I would say that's another big one, just to make sure everyone's aligned, because it's, if I'm going to get a phone call at 9 o'clock on a Saturday, probably I'm not going to answer. So just making sure people understand exactly what the communication lines are. And to be honest, when it comes to the scope of work, and I know you're going to love this piece, but it's like the contract that you have in place with these people, defining exactly what the expectations of both sides are, ultimately where you want to land, just being very clear on exactly what each party is responsible for.
Just like any relationship, you need to properly manage expectations.
Yep.
Otherwise, it's not going to work, and that's the job of the contract, right? So tell me about one of your favorite client success stories.
Oh, maybe not a specific one, but maybe like a theme that I just really get passionate about is really about the people. So when it's a situation where you can avoid laying people off or you can hire more people, just the impact of that on the community and being able to provide families with benefits, I would say for me, like, I love when those types of things come up and we can work through it and come up with alternative solutions where we can save money in other places to be able to provide for folks, whether it's within their immediate family or with the folks that work for them.
That's awesome. So they get you on board and they're doing real successful, and then they need to hire. Do you help them hire an internal CFO when they're ready for that point?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really helping them define exactly what the job responsibilities are. And the hope would be when someone comes in full time, if I've been engaged already, like the bookkeeping is being done timely each period, like they're in pretty good shape. So I would say it's really helping them. And there's a lot of great people that are available for that type of position as well. So it's making sure the compensation matches the responsibilities as well. Sometimes I think there's a little disconnect on how much do I need to pay this person. And if you truly want somebody who's got experience and it's going to add value on a full-time basis, it's making sure that that's competitive.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, I think it's a great position, but you're going to know better. You're going to see better than someone that's not familiar with being a CFO.
Yeah,
So if
absolutely.
someone wanted to start this process, they already have a bookkeeper. They wanted to take to the next level. What would be their first steps?
Yeah, so I think it's really finding the CFO that's right for you. A big piece of my process is making sure there's value alignment. So making sure that we're going to play nice. So it's making sure that I truly understand what the values of your company are and kind of what the landscape is. But if you're looking to work with a CFO, and me specifically, it is reaching out usually on our website to fill out a form, and then we have intake and discovery calls to understand exactly like, well, why are you thinking you need a fractional CFO now? Because usually I'll say, it's not the scenario of we've got all this money and we don't know what to do with it, right? It's usually I've got a problem and I need help.
Yeah, that's awesome. Where can people find all of your information? Where can people find you?
Yeah, so my website is probably the best bet just to fill out the form, and then we'll be in contact shortly after that. So I'm sure we can put it in the show notes, but my website is unconventional-cfo.com, which is the best place to reach me.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking time to be on the show, and you've been a great guest and have some great information. And I hope that guys will really take the time to look into it. It really makes a difference between a successful business and a business that does what you want, as opposed to just running day to day to make payroll.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, thank you.